Hello, in this video we will guide you through the very fun setup for the Occultist featuring a new transfigured spell gem. The new Cold Snap of Power is seemingly the ideal spell. It has very high base damage and effectiveness of the added damage, a 10% base critical strike chance, and very fast cast speed. The only downside here is that it has a cooldown, which you can bypass by sacrificing power charges. The Cold Snap itself can generate power charges on critical strikes, and if you pair this spell with the power charge on critical strike support at max quality, you will have over 100% chance to gain power charges when you hit with critical strike. With so high base crit chance, it is trivial to reach the cap. The Occultist is the best ascendancy for this skill. It grants you a lot of cold damage, access to additional curse, and boosts your damage and area of effect for each power charge you have. However, if you rely on the power charges to scale your damage, it can be very inconsistent when you spend them to bypass the cooldown. To preserve all benefits from the maximum power charges, you should use Ralakesh's Impatience boots. Those boots will also grant you all benefits from frenzy and endurance charges, which would be very hard to generate otherwise. You still need to generate charges to be able to spend them. The Cold Snap of Power removes the damage over time portion of the original spell but has much better hit damage. You will be easily able to freeze or heavily chill all enemies in the game. You will get insane damage bonuses for every additional power charge you obtain. The build is moderately tanky due to high evasion, immunity to elemental ailments, and a high amount of maximum life sourced from the Attula's Hunger. You can use the Enfeeble as your third curse, heavily reducing the damage of affected enemies. The clear speed is great. Your Cold Snap can cover a wide area, shattering all enemies caught by it. The single target damage is very good and scales with your investments very well. You will need the fundamental unique items to start playing with this build. Rare items with basic defenses will be sufficient at first but should be upgraded as soon as your budget allows for it. You will obviously need certain unique items that interact with your charges. The Attula's Hunger armor grants a lot of maximum life and significantly reduces the price of all other items since you don't need maximum life modifiers on them. The unique jewels are very powerful even in the most basic version. Void Battery grants additional power charge, cast speed, critical strike chance, and a lot of spell damage. You should use 2 of them. You might be tempted to use the Malachai's Loop Shield for even more power charges, but it makes spending them very annoying. The Badge of the Brotherhood is another important element of every power charge stacker. It raises your frenzy charge limit to be equal to power charges, which in this build means 36% more damage and cast speed. It also lowers the cooldown of your Frostblink. With those boots you can consume your power charges without losing damage. It also grants you the effects of frenzy and endurance charges, which you couldn't generate otherwise. Militant Faith converts nearby Keystone into Inner Conviction Keystone, which grants you more damage per power charge but disables generating frenzy charges, which you bypass with your boots. Ideally, it should give you useful bonuses for each devotion but doesn't convert any of the picked up notables. Attula's Hunger grants tons of maximum life and lowers the burden on your other items. It should be corrupted for +2 levels for AoE gems, and linked with tainted fusings. Doing so will make coloring with tainted chromatics much easier, as those ignore the attribute requirements of items. Watcher's Eye is a very useful jewel for this build. You can use it to obtain spell suppression, life leech, redirect a portion of physical damage to be taken as elemental, or simply boost your damage with hatred or zealotry. This helmet can be corrupted to give additional power charge. It would grant you tons of damage, but you would need to get plenty of mana reservation efficiency on your jewels or readjust your aura setup. It also doesn't provide an energy shield, which would make sustaining casting harder. On your rare items you will need spell suppression, resistances, and attributes. To improve the damage you should look for cast speed and critical strike multiplier. It is important to have a corrupted implicit on any of your jewel that grants 2% reservation efficiency so your leech won't stop once you fill 50% maximum life with petrified blood. You can get a lot of mana reservation efficiency with Essence and Eldritch Implicit. It should also provide attributes or resistance. You can opt for an additional power charge, but you would probably need to readjust your auras, as it is hard to have both modifiers at once. At first, you can use a regular rare armor with bonuses to maximum life, spell suppression, energy shield, resistances, and aura effect. When doing so, you will also need maximum life modifiers on all other rare items. It is easier to assemble, but you will miss roughly 1000 maximum life and 2 bonus gem levels for your main spell. Here you should focus on defensive bonuses such as resistance, spell suppression, or attributes. You can get a bit of damage here too, but it is not as important as correct Eldritch implicits that can be used to apply the unnerve and exposure on your enemies. Energy shield recharge rate can significantly improve your sustain. Your belt is another defensive item. Look for resistance and strength. You can craft a modifier that grants energy shield regeneration while a rare or unique enemy is nearby to improve your sustain. You should use the Stygian Vice for the additional Abyss Jewel socket. Abyss Jewel is the best target to obtain the corrupted implicit that grants reservation efficiency. Other than that, it should provide maximum life, resistances, attributes, and optionally cast speed and critical strike multiplier. Jewels do not count as equipped items. On your rare rings you should get a lot of resistances and attributes. To improve your damage you should look for cast speed and crit multiplier. Make sure you can sustain the improved cast speed, otherwise it would be a waste. Crafting mana cost reduction will also help in that regard. Here you should focus on maximum life, missing resistances or attributes, and critical strike multiplier. It can also provide a bit of mana reservation efficiency, which will be essential if you want to use a helmet with an additional power charge. Thanks to Cluster Jewel you can get the Doriani's Lesson Notable, which grants you Life Leech. Pair it with 2 other useful modifiers depending on your budget. The Cold to the Core Notable is quite good in this build since you need plenty of attributes for your gems anyway. Taste of Hate is a great defensive flask that grants a decent amount of protection against physical and cold damage. Make sure to not include it when you balance your resistance, as the uptime on this flask is not perfect. For your remaining magic flasks we recommend using Quartz Flask with mana cost of skills reduction, Jade Flask with evasion rating bonus, Quicksilver Flask with cast speed bonus, and a Life Flask with bleeding removal. Cold Snap of Power deals high cold damage in the area. The cooldown can be bypassed by spending power charges. It has the highest critical strike chance in the game and has a 30% chance to generate a power charge if you critically hit an enemy. You can use the spell Cascade support for better area coverage and potential overlaps if you aim correctly, but it is harder to land 3 hits than it used to before the change. You can instead use the Bone Chill support to increase the damage of the single hit, making it easier to freeze. Grace grants a lot of evasion rating and helps you improve it further. It also has very potent available modifiers on the Watcher's Eye Jewel. Purity of Elements grants immunity to all elemental ailments and provides plenty of elemental resistances, which saves you a lot of trouble gearing up. If you have enough resistance, you can swap it to Zealotry Aura. Petrified Blood delays the damage from incoming hits, making them easier to manage. It makes your leech more effective and enables the Pain Attunement Keystone for 30% more damage. Vitality grants life regeneration and allows you to gain Life Leech via Watcher's Eye Jewel. You can keep it at a low level to reduce the mana reservation. You should link your main auras with the Enlightened support to reduce their mana reservation. You will also need a bit of reservation efficiency on your gear. Herald of Ice grants a bit of cold damage to your spells and explodes with cold damage around the enemies you shatter. You could replace it with Arctic Armor to gain physical damage reduction while casting. The Arrogance causes linked auras to reserve life instead of mana. If you get at least 1% global reservation efficiency, your leech won't stop upon filing the Petrified Blood limit. Zealotry improves your spell damage and critical strike chance. You can also use the Hatred Aura instead. The main difference comes from the relevant modifiers on the Watcher's Eye. The Divine Blessing changes your permanent aura into a temporary buff that doesn't reserve any mana but requires an upfront mana cost, which you can pay using the Energy Shield thanks to the Eldritch Battery Keystone. Frostbite is your primary curse that lowers the cold resistance and makes your freeze last longer on the affected enemies. Enfeeble lowers the damage and accuracy of your enemies. You can also use the temporal chains to slow them down and further improve the duration of your freeze. Elemental weakness lowers all elemental resistance of your foes. You can use the third curse thanks to the Whispers of Doom notable. Arcanist Brand is a brand skill that can attach to an enemy and cast all link spells in rapid succession. Thanks to this skill you will apply all 3 curses with one button. To apply your curses you can also use the new Bane of Condemnation, which has higher cast speed but significantly lower area of effect. The regular Bane is a bad choice as it lowers the effectiveness of your curses. Frostblink is a very good movement skill for this build. It deals enough damage to kill weak enemies, and the cooldown is heavily reduced by your amulet. If find yourself out of charges very often, you should consider using any skill with a fast hit rate such as this brand to generate power charges. You might need this setup against bosses if your critical strike chance is still low, or if enemies can steal your power charges. It shouldn't be necessary during regular gameplay. Steelskin creates a protective barrier that absorbs incoming damage and stops bleeding effects on you. You should kill all bandits in the Act 2 to be rewarded with 2 additional passive tree points by Aramir. For your major Pantheon power you should pick the Soul of Era Kali, as it helps you with mitigating damage over time effects, which are the main weakness of petrified blood builds. As the minor Pantheon power we recommend using the Soul of Shikari. It further reduces the damage you take from poisons and chaos damage. You will need a very high critical strike chance to reliably generate power charges, so you should use any other cold spell to level up. You can start scaling crit early, but the best choice would be any cold damage over time spell, for example, the regular Cold Snap. It doesn't require crit and scales very well with just cold spell passives. Fortunately, Witch excels at this type of build during the campaign. On the passive tree you will pick up 2 additional maximum power charges. The third one should be allocated by the anointment on your amulet. This build utilizes 3 very powerful keystones. The Pain Attunement simply grants you 30% more spell damage as long as you use the Petrified Blood aura. The Eldritch Battery changes your energy shield into a resource you can use to cast your spells. It will constantly recharge for 33% of its maximum value per second, which you can boost by increasing the recharge rate, adding the Energy Shield Leech, and simply increasing its maximum value. The third keystone, Inner Conviction, comes from the Timeless Jewel. It grants you a lot of spell damage but disables the Frenzy charge generation. Do not pick up the Hexmaster keystone until you can convert it with this jewel. Cluster Jewel is the best source of life leech for elemental spell builds. Other notables are not that important. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions feel free to ask them in the comments. Have a good day, and see you next time.